This is really a Hines Archstone project, and one of the organizational efforts we made in the project was to say we should both work on every piece equally, and it's really worked out so well on different projects. We'll have different circumstances, but on this project where we had an equal interest in each land use, it really prevented issues coming up with how should the subgrade be allocated, or how the different elements of the infrastructure get allocated. But anyway, I wanted to make, just to say that this was each of those components, Hines and Archstone, making judgments together. As Chuck said, Archstone, for example, would lead the apartment land use. Archstone and Hines together sort of work on the retail. Hines led the office component. Hines is out front leader of the condominiums, mostly because the senior project officer and my good friend Al Neely, who relatively recently passed away, just didn't like condominiums. But he wanted to do projects. He said, we'll do it, but I got to act like you're the one. Hines is out front on the condominium. Here is the schedule. It's hard to believe, but 902, is that somewhere around 9 years ago, the city, we could spend 2 hours probably on this schedule, and it's really an integral part of the development project, but most of the time these groups like to look at pictures, so we'll see how we're doing. But if you're really in the development business, it isn't pictures, it's this schedule. The request for proposals from the city was in September '02. And the city probably put 2 years of work into the thinking about the site before the September '02 at the Office of Planning and the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development, and what might be the best use of approximately 10 acres of land coming up in the middle of the central business district of Washington, D.C. And that was really a very unusual opportunity. And they went through the whole range of alternatives, and as Chuck described, the city generally came up with the approach that what would be best for this city would be a new live, work, play, mixed-use environment. The proposals were turned in October of '02. It took about 14 months for the city's selection process between proposing and reproposing and shortlisting and shortlisting. And Hines Archstone team was fortunate to be selected by the Office of the Deputy Mayor Economic Development, and then the mayor to be the preferred developer. After that selection, then there was a detailed ERA, exclusive rights agreement for the site, and LDA land disposition agreement for the site that Hines Archstone and the city negotiated. And the Hines Archstone objective at that point, because a project like this takes one heck of a lot of money to plan as you go step by step through the progression of planning and approvals. We wanted that as detailed as we could make it, and it was a formal legal document that essentially represented a contract to purchase a site for Hines Archstone if we met certain conditions, with the city agreeing to certain conditions. And that 19 months, maybe half of that was negotiation of the agreement, but the other half was the mayor presenting the proposed developer to the city council, and the city council re-agonizing about what were the proposed uses for the site, and different aspects of the city planning that the council was interested in, one major aspect of which was the Convention Center Hotel, which, as Chuck mentioned, is now under construction next to the Convention Center. But until that site was assembled, the the city council reserved a component of this site to be the convention center hotel if it needed to be. So we had to do a master plan around the potential that the convention center hotel could have been on about a third of this site. With the formal approval of the city council of an exclusive rights agreement, we then went into the detailed master planning process and the range of alternatives for organizing the site. Should the roads be introduced to the project? Should they not be? While we had an outline of the mix of uses objective, then you have to do site utilization studies within the context of alternative road configurations to figure out what amount of exact space could be configured for the apartments or the condominiums or the office or the retail, and how you get all that fit together. And we worked hand in hand with the Office of Planning on the city in that process, and it was a smooth process, and I think that was about as fast as it could go given the objectives of the city to do the highest quality project that you reasonably could do in an investment grade context. With that master plan in place, one of the risk management approaches we had was to say, after the master plan was in place, we wanted to do schematic design and then confirm what the zoning approval was in place based on a schematic design level of approval. And that level of approval is real important in a risk management standpoint, because once you go from schematic design to design development working drawings, you're really spending a lot of money. And we wanted to know those components of the project, the full master plan, the schematic design, and the zoning were all signed off in writing by the city before we proceeded with working drawings. And that was what we call in the legal terminology of the contract documents, the closing. And the closing wasn't start of construction, it was when we formalized the agreement on the schematic design and the road configuration, and the zoning was in place, and the overall project economic viability prior to proceeding with the working drawings. At that point, it really more shifted into what we're more used to, the execution of the development process. We went through the working drawings and permits and approvals over a nominal period. It says there 42 months. But we were designing 2 office buildings, 2 apartment buildings. You'll see 2 condominium buildings and retail under it all, and a street, reintroducing the street grid to Washington that existed before the old convention center was built. At the end, near the end of the working drawings, when we could then put a more accurate estimate on the probable project cost, the big numbers being the construction costs, we started talking to potential international investors, both national and international, but it takes a very big institutional investor to be able to undertake a project of this scope all at the same time. And we are building the whole project, or at least 2/3 of it, except for a hotel parcel, from the start. And we're in those discussions with selected alternatives in late '09, and relatively quickly reached a memorandum of understanding with this overseas investor to be our investor partner on the project in April of 10. We were able to complete the full due diligence with the investor and a full partnership agreement with the investor in October of 10. We finished the subcontractor bidding with Clark and completion of the general contract in 3.5 months. The city reviewed the final plans for the project for consistency with what we said we were going to build in our original ground leases back, whatever that is, 3 or 4 years before. And we actually released Clark for construction